Hello again, welcome back everyone. LiquorHound here with you. Thank you for joining me for another spirit review video. And we are at that time of year once again here in the fall when the allocated bourbons, the holy grail of bourbon, starts dropping. Pappy Van Winkle, Buffalo Trace Antique Collection, Four Roses, the list goes on and on. But I will say this, that rat race is becoming tiresome, okay? Even for a guy like me, it's becoming tiresome. That is why I'm happy to see great quality bourbons hit the shelves that aren't being just swallowed up immediately. And that's where you can win, because if you're unable to get those allocated bourbons, these make excellent substitutes. First, I'm going to be reviewing Yellowstone bourbon. Now, this is a limited edition bourbon. Only 6,000 of these were bottled, but I'm still seeing them here on the shelves. And like I said, it's retailing around $100, $105, somewhere in there. But it is, like I said, it's a 105-year celebratory whiskey from when Steve and Paul Beam's great-grandfather, Minor Case Beam, had sold his distillery, and at that time, that's when the whole Yellowstone bourbon was originally coming out. So here it is 105 years later, bang, they're redoing it, okay? Now, the quick little background on that. Steve Beam is actually the master distiller there at Limestone Branch Distillery. I've been there. It's a great place to go visit if you haven't been there. He's creating some really, really nice stuff down there. Well, in this case, what he did was he blended some casks, okay? Not necessarily from his distillery, all right? These didn't come from his distillery, but he did blend them, okay? So it's kind of like sourcing whiskey, like Smooth Ambler does, or, a lot of these other people are doing it. That's basically what he did. He was commissioned to do that by Luxco. So he took a 7-year Ryed bourbon, a 7-year wheated bourbon, and a 12-year Ryed bourbon. And what he did was he took the 12-year Ryed bourbon and dumped it out, and then refilled that barrel with the 7-year Ryed and the 7-year wheated, and gave it a little further maturation, get some of those good flavors into both of those marrying together, and then blended the three together, essentially is what happened. Okay, came out to 105 proof. I think it's a beautiful whiskey, and we're going to review that in a second. The other one is the Booker's, the Center Cut batch. Now, if you look on every bottle of Booker's, right up here in the top, there's going to be a little batch code. The old ones were kind of weird deciphers, but this one is 2015-03, known as the Center Cut, with a picture of a little T-bone steak up there on the top. Again, all these Bookers that are coming out now, like Dot or Big Man or the Center Cut, and then the newest one is the Oven Buster. Some of these are Roundtable batches, some of these are not. The Center Cut and the Oven Buster that just dropped, I think, are Roundtable batches. And so what that simply means is that Fred No there at Jim Beam had either brought in some of the bourbon people that he respects or sent samples to them for their approval. So once they taste them, they taste the 5 or whatever he sent them, picks their favorite, and that's what he bottles under that specific batch. Okay, now this one is 7-year-old as well, 7 years, 2 months, and 28 days old. Bottled at 127.2 proof. That's really, really big, okay? But it is Booker's, that's how they do it. Alright, well, so we're going to start with the Yellowstone. I always suggest starting with the lower proof, especially when tasting these two back-to-back, because I have flip-flopped these before, and wow, yeah, this does not perform after this big bourbon. Alright. On the nose, Yellowstone 105 proof bourbon. Wow. So nice. When you are very familiar with Pappy Van Winkle's, or you're very familiar with the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection, you kind of have a bar set in your mind of, what bourbons, what they need to reach to be at that upper echelon. There's certain nose factors or certain palate factors. And this one, to me, has the nose to be right up there with them. It has a really nice, fresh, ground corn base to it, which is surprising because, most of the time when whiskeys, especially bourbons, hit 7 years of age, that kind of grain usually fades away. You only find that a lot in really young bourbons, like Garrison Brothers. But this one, I still get the real nice cornmeal. But on top of that, a lot of brown sugar, a lot of caramel. There's even the dried orange peels in this one that I usually like to find in a bourbon. Fruits, definitely popping. It's a lot of the typical red fruits, raspberries, strawberries, a lot of cherries. cinnamon spice, a little clove, and this is the thing I like about this one. This is coming from that 12-year rye. A little like some floral notes, but also an old leather. That's that old whiskey factor dropping in. And it also has a little bit of doughiness, a little bit of that wheat, that 7-year wheat whiskey element is coming through. You know, that rye in there, that 12 and 7-year rye is providing a lot of that floralness. It's providing a lot of that fruitiness, a lot of that spiciness. But this one, it also has some of that wheated bourbon aspect to it. And it really comes through on the nose. Really nice. All right, so let's go ahead and taste it because we can't go back to back like that. Very drinkable. Ooh. Really nice mouthfeel. Man, I would think this would be 12 years old, not necessarily 7 years old. Until that mid palate. That's when that little cinnamon kind of ramps. It's like, whoa, it's a little warm. But right when it starts to peak, it actually, all the flavors that are compounding around it are just really telling you, wow, this has got old bourbon in it. It's really nicely blended. All right, let's see if we can start at the top again. Creamy brown sugar caramel. As it drops, as you're getting those red fruits, that orange peel aspect, dried peels. And then it hits that mid palate, and that cinnamon and clove are in there, and they kind of join in with all those in the beginning. Ramps up, oak starts picking up right here at the back of the mid palate. Not really tannic, thankfully, because you're not talking really old bourbon, but you're actually tasting the wood, not the tannins, not the bitterness, not the drying, just the wood. Old leather comes in at the back end. Whisper of tobacco as well. Now those two elements are things that I really kind of look for in a really, really nice bourbon, because you're going to find those in Pappy, you're going to find those in just old stags, stuff like that, 16-year-old stags. That's where you get that tobacco and leather a lot of times, but you got to be careful, because when you're, you know, those bourbons, the reason they're so high dollar and the reason they're so allocated and so well renowned is because those flavors are in there, but they're not out of balance. They're not really super bitter. They're not super drying on the palate. This is not drying at all. This is wonderful. Oh, yeah. Great, great drinking bourbon. Not only a beautiful bottle, I mean, that's a beautiful shape, beautiful presentation to have in your bar, but that's a great drinker. It has a little bit of the elements of those really great whiskeys, but it's still very lively up front, and you get that fresh grain that I was getting on the nose doesn't really come through on the palate because there's so much caramel and almost brown sugar, even like cocoa powder dusted on this guy, to go along with the dried orange peels and that clove and that cinnamon, that old leather, and that little tobacco on the back end. Chocolate still on that back end as well. Again, not milk, more like, well, maybe a little milk, but also a little cocoa powder, like dark chocolate in there, 70%, let's say. Wow, that's great. Okay. Finish. Still just rolling on this guy. Hate to rush him. Alright, Booker's the center cut. 127.2 proof. These have been airing out, by the way, for about 10 minutes, so I have to give it a good little stir here. Oh, you can get your nose right in the glass on this one. 127.2, usually it'll push you away from the glass. This Booker's nice. Does not smell 127. If I was to guess, maybe 107, 110 is what it smells like. But you're getting, this one I get more, not really caramel, I get a lot of brown sugar element, a lot of cinnamon, some mint, red fruits, but they're kind of really hidden up in that brown sugar. What is that? There's a little, it is just cinnamon, and there is red fruits, but they're just so compounded up in that brown sugar, that heavy rich, burnt, almost brown sugar, heading into caramel zone. Alright, on to the taste. That's a drinker. Now, this one isn't quite the typical Booker's. Wow, here it comes on the second end. Ooh. The thing that I always look for in Booker's is Booker's usually, for a long time, they were just really heavily brown sugar and really heavily spiced. You know, that big, it just swelled and blew up in your mouth. That's what I used to think of when I, tasted a lot of Booker's. They're all kind of similar profile. But this one, very unique. This one isn't like that at all. This one actually is the tamer side of Booker's. Well, at least it intros like that, because when you first sip it, it feels very, very creamy, all right? Very creamy, very drinkable right up front. Heavy brown sugar. And then you swallow and you're expecting that cinnamon rush and that big swell, and you don't get it. What you actually get is you get the eucalyptus, or a mintiness that kind of comes on that mid palate, and it kind of commingles with that heavy brown sugar up front. Almost milk chocolate in this one. Very, very sweet too. For a Booker's, it feels very sweet on the palate. And now once you hit that mid palate and that eucalyptus and the brown sugar and that sweetness, and that's when I start noticing the red fruits kind of dropping in. Red fruits are in here. Wood. Wow, cinnamon. Okay, now we're getting on the back of that mid palate. That's where you get the swell of the cinnamon. Again, I almost feel like it has mulling spices in this one as well. But they don't show up till the back end. So it almost like it shifts gears, which I think every good bourbon, or every great bourbon, should do. I like for it to not just be one-dimensional, here's the flavors and let's just fade them out. I like it to go, here's the flavors, and now here's some more flavors. Once you hit that mid palate, you get, whoa, it's a whole nother gear. That's what this one's giving me. Because just when you think it's going to be just the brown sugar and that eucalyptus, then here comes that cinnamon swell. Wow, leading you into a really nice sweet oak. Chocolate. Those mulling spices in there. And it just has a really, really long finish. Very, very drinkable for a Booker's. To me, it kind of reminds me of that 25th anniversary, but not quite as oily. That one was just so oily. But anyway, if you're out there, you see these on the shelves. This one's retailing around $50 right now. Again, this is 100, but there's only about 6,000 of them. So I really think both of these are great additions to your bar. If you happen to see them, pick them up. All right? Everybody have a great evening. I hope you enjoyed this video, and cheers.